Hit record so we can. All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another timely topic session. Today, we're talking about sales, and we have our friend Steve here on the call with us, a UConn alum who will tell you a little bit more about himself, talking to us a little bit about his experience in sales and translating that into small businesses, startups, and implications around that. So, Steve, would you like to take it away?
Yeah, absolutely. Jen, thanks so much. And I was really looking forward to taking a part in today's Timely Topics conversation. So thank you for the invite. And for all of you who are either watching live or will be watching the recorded version, hopefully you share the same enthusiasm, or some of you do, for sales that I do. And you're able to get a few takeaways from today's Timely Topics conversation. I thought it'd be best, I really like to spend the majority of my time in the Q&A just to be able to answer any questions that the group might have in regards to sales, but I thought it might be a good starting point to give you a sense of my backstory and my background and some of the things that have allowed me to be successful, if you will, during my tenure in sales. So a little bit about myself. I actually graduated from UConn in 2009. So I was in the School of Communication, and Rory was one of my professors. That's where he and I actually first met years and years ago. So really my foundation, I think, and my passion for sales, if you will, started in, the School of Communication, where I got a better sense of how to interact with people on a day-to-day basis, how to read nonverbal cues, things like that. I mean, when you really think of the basis of sales, I think most successful salespeople have a really strong background in communication. So it all started back in, 2005, 2000 through 2009 during my time at UConn there. I jumped right into the workforce right upon graduation. So I've been in the payroll and human capital management space for 13 years at this point. I spent the front end, the majority of my sales career at a very large corporation, selling payroll software, managing sales teams, working in the small business and the major market spaces. So I've got a vast array, I think, at this point, and still growing, of sales knowledge across all different industries and segments here. Currently, I work for a privately held payroll and HR provider in a 100% virtual environment. And I think that's important to note because obviously post-COVID, a lot of the interactions that we have, regardless of the industry that you're in, are virtual based. So I think it is important to note for anyone, any of the entrepreneurs that are concerned about sales and sales process and how that, how things may change in time, whether it stays virtual, whether it goes back to face-to-face. I'm a true believer that sales can be conveyed and you can be successful in sales regardless of what environment I should say you're in, whether that's face-to-face in person or more of a virtual setting as I am today. Cool. So, it's funny, I can't take credit for, making sales simple, the topic for today's Timely Topics conversation, but I will give a lot of the kudos to Michaela for coming up with that. And I think she hit it right on the head. When I was thinking about, topics and things to discuss during the conversation today, I said, you know what, I could probably go in a million different directions here, but I do want to keep it as simple as I possibly can. So I'd like to share some of the principles, if you will, that have allowed me to be successful. Now, my disclaimer always is these are things that have allowed me to be successful in my environment. I think everyone's a little bit different. Everyone's got their own strategy. And if you believe in that strategy enough, I'm also a believer that you can be successful using a number of various tactics and different ways to accomplish the end goal. But these are things that have worked for me. So hopefully they're of value to some of you and you can take home a few takeaways. The first principle of sales that I think has really allowed me to be successful is identifying and determining who my target audience is. A lot of you who are entrepreneurs and have an idea and a concept that you're looking to bring to market. I think one of the mistakes that I made initially when I started in the space that I'm in the payroll and human capital management space, I thought everyone was a buyer. I really did. I would go down the street and I would knock on doors and I'd say, oh, that person's going to sign up with me in time, or I'm going to be able to bring them on board as a client. The reality is that's just not true. And there's plenty of what I call time and energy vampires out there These are people that ultimately will take a meeting with you just to take a meeting, right? They like the face-to-face human interaction, especially nowadays where we might not get out as much. They'll take a meeting with anyone that comes and knocks on their door, or anyone that invites them to a Zoom meeting. So I think one of the keys to being successful, one of the keys to success for me, I should say, was really determining, okay, who is a buyer and who's not. Almost more importantly, who are people that I don't necessarily want to position my product to, and quite frankly, waste time in this market when I should focus most of my sales efforts here. The analogy that I use is a fishing analogy. So I don't know if any of you that are watching, fish, but I promise you don't have to in order to understand this. I've always been a believer that I would much rather fish in a pond with 100 fish than say 10 fish, right? I want to be able to cast out and have the best opportunity to catch a fish versus a pond that only has 10 fish, where the opportunities are much more limited. And I think that's the case in sales as well. You want to find your pond. Find the pond that you should be fishing in with the most fish versus the other pond that doesn't have nearly as many opportunities. So that's really, again, the number one piece that I think that has allowed me to have success so far in my role is to identify who's a buyer and who's not. The second piece is I do think that it's really important to block off time for revenue generating activities. Now, what do I mean by revenue generating activities? Well, in sales, we identify it as a pipeline, right? So you've got your sales pipeline that you're constantly moving people in and out of. You're bringing on new organizations or individuals as clients, but then you're constantly backfilling it with new opportunities as well. I think that it's really, really important to dedicate a certain amount of time. For me, it's a block in the morning. So from 8 o'clock till 10 o'clock in the morning, I spend all of my time, literally all of my time, either prospecting for new accounts, new clients, or networking. I've got a large network, so I'll call on my network. I'll make contact with my network to really assist me. And again, building up my pipeline. The reality is, if we don't dedicate time to revenue generating activities, naturally what happens? You decide to respond to emails. Maybe you take a longer breakfast than usual. You have an additional cup of coffee. You're texting with your family. You go on Facebook for 20 minutes. And then by the end of the day, what happens? That most important task, that revenue generating task, is put on the back burner and you don't have any time for it. So I'm a big believer that a certain block of time should be blocked off every single day for revenue generating activities. I'm also a believer that finding or creating a sales process that is repeatable is really, really important. If any of you are like me, I find that I work best based off of repetition. Things that I can do on a day in and day out basis over and over again that yield results, of course. And that's where the fine tuning and the tinkering with the process comes into play. You want to find something that works and you're able to have success with. But I do think that, finding a sales process that you can replicate regardless of the circumstance is really important. And what I mean by this is, to give you an idea of my process, I have a 4-step process in sales. My first meeting is an exploratory meeting where I learn more about the organization that I'm meeting with. And then they also have the ability to ask me questions about our suite of services. The second meeting is more of an in-depth demonstration in which we're able to highlight and demonstrate our suite of services and how it is able to help the organization, and it's customized to them. It's a really tailored approach. The third step in my line of work would be a proposal review, the ability to run through the numbers together and get a better sense of the annual cost structure to the organization. And then the fourth step would be an implementation timeline review. This is my ability to transmit and translate information to the prospective client in regards to start times. How long is the implementation process? How much of a runway will they need to get everything set up? And then at that point, I typically ask them to become a client. So that's my 4-step process. And regardless of circumstance, industry, size of the group, I try and repeat that every single day, every single opportunity that I have with a prospective client. And then the last piece, something that I think is really, really overlooked by a lot of salespeople, unfortunately, is follow-up. I think having a really good structured follow-up plan is so key in sales. And in particular, what I mean by that is initially when you reach out to somebody, whether or not there's any level of interest, you set a 3, 6, 12-month follow-up regimen. A lot of CRM databases and softwares will allow you to actually automate that, which is awesome. So you don't even have to pay much mind to it. You can set up a recurring 3, 6, 12-month generated email, but you can also set up your own. Maybe you place a phone call at the 3-month mark. Maybe then you follow it up with an email in 4 or 5 months. But I think follow-up's very, very important. I know personally, anytime I'm in the market for a new product or service, around my house, I really value those people and providers and vendors that have great follow-up skills. Those are typically the individuals or groups that I end up giving the business to, quite frankly. So I think follow-up is extremely important as well. So again, these are really my 4 core principles. Everyone has their own idea of what successful salespeople should look like and do, but these are just 4 things. And I apologize that I wasn't able to round it out with 5. I was thinking of a 5th one, but I wanted it to be genuine. So these are really the 4 that I've lived by over the last 13, 14 years. So hopefully you were able to take something away from it and get a better idea of what's made me and allowed me to be successful in sales here. With that, as I had mentioned, we're right at the halfway mark. I would like to open it up for some questions. Please, anything, I'm kind of an open book here. So if there's anything top of mind that you'd like me to elaborate on, I'm more than happy to give you my 2 cents.
Steve, I have a question. What would be your advice for someone who feels like they are at a roadblock when it comes to making sales and it not going as they had initially planned their sales to go?
That's a really good question. So I think all salespeople at some point in their career, and probably over multiple points throughout their career, experience this quote unquote roadblock. It happens all the time. It could be cyclical. It can be transitioning to a new industry or a new profession, new business overall. Sales is definitely a long game. So I think you've got to have that type of mentality where most success in sales certainly does not happen overnight, at least not the case for me. Maybe some people it has, but in most instances and most people that I interact with on a regular basis that are in sales, it's taken a long time to generate a book of clients, a long pipeline, like I mentioned a minute ago. So I think having that strong willpower and mindset to kind of push through some of those struggles is really important. But let's face it, if that's not for you, I think there's no shame in finding somebody that has that mental fortitude and can go through rejection day in and day out. That's one of the other things that I really believe in, is that there's certain tasks and things within your organization that you're just not a great fit for. Consider outsourcing them, right? And maybe not initially. You don't necessarily have the budget to do so. So a lot of this, boots on the ground sales work does have to come from you. But I think in time, maybe the goal would be to hire somebody that's more experienced. So either be able to push through on your own, or there's no shame in outsourcing the sales function either.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there any other questions from the group?
Yeah, so I loved the thought that you put out there around the first thing in the morning that you do from 8 to 10 is find new strategies or new ways to bring business into your business, right? So I'm curious if there's specific examples of things that you found that work really well. I know you talked about opening up your network, probably like scrolling through LinkedIn, trying to make those connections, but are those 2 hours really well defined? Do you have a list of goals and objectives, or do you just kind of push through those 2 hours and get as many emails out and contacts made?
Yeah, another good question. So that process for me is defined at this point, and it's repeatable. So again, just by nature, I find that I'm most successful if I can repeat something time and time again, day in and day out. So typically my process around that, Jen, would be to have my list of prospective clients, call it 100 to 150 prospective groups throughout New England at this point. And my first step would be, if it was a group that I had never reached out to, for example, I would go on LinkedIn. I would find their LinkedIn page, the organization's LinkedIn page. I would see if there was any connections within the organization itself, or if I had any, second degree, I think we're all probably somewhat familiar with LinkedIn. I would search my second degree, third degree connections as well. At that point, it's like a puzzle. So I try and really just fit the pieces. And if I can find somebody within my network that has an affiliation or is associated to somebody within that prospective group, my first attempt is going to be able to reach out to my network. I just have always found that my success rate is much higher if I can lean on my network to open the door within another prospective group. But I will say after that, let's say I strike out, and that happens quite often as well. Unfortunately, there are no first, second, or third degree connections. I like prospecting. I like picking up the phone and reaching out to people and seeing if I can start a conversation. So first piece would be to lean on my network. Second would be to place a phone call. In this day and age, as we all know too well, nobody really picks up their phone. So I typically do leave a voicemail. I'm still a believer in voicemails. Call me old fashioned, but it's just something that I have always found to be useful. But then I follow it up immediately with an email. So I'll go voicemail and then email, and then I'll task something out. So within our CRM database, it's really helpful and user friendly. I can set up a task, and that task is typically 3 to 5 days out to then schedule another phone call, another email. So that's really my defined process at this point, from 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock. That's all I'm doing. I'm just going through my list and trying to generate new opportunities.
So that's really helpful. And one of the things I keep thinking about, I know you've been doing sales for a long time. And when you said 13 years in the experience, I know you and I graduated from UConn the same year. It frightened me as to the number of years we've been professionally doing something. So thank you for that realization. But so you've been doing sales now for 13 years. And so you probably have built up the confidence, the ability to hear no, to combat out your own insecurities around having these kinds of conversations. But for our early entrepreneurs or those that maybe don't feel as comfortable, maybe sales doesn't come firsthand to them, are there specific skills or tactics you can have them overcome when they don't want to feel pushy or they don't know how to feel confident in these conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think too, one of the important things to know, and obviously easier said than done, is to try and not take any of these interactions personally. I think anytime that you're put in a position to try and sell something to somebody, regardless of how much value you're providing, most people are on the defense immediately. So naturally they push back. They may be nasty from time to time. So I do think a constant reminder is to just always tell yourself not to take things personally. I think that's really important. But one of the strategies that I've come to adopt and had a lot of success with is literally writing down every objection that I hear. And I think naturally, depending on the industry and the line of work that you're in, you're going to find that there's maybe 10 to 12 common objections. There's not many more than that you're going to hear on a regular basis. So anytime that I would hear an objection early on, and now I've got them all memorized, so it's really helpful, but I would write down that objection. I would have a spreadsheet and I would write it down. I would type it out. And then once I got off the phone, the first time around, you kind of flub through your words and kind of sound like an idiot a little bit, trying to overcome the objection. And sometimes you got a meeting, most times you didn't, just the way it is. But immediately after hanging up with that prospective client, I would go back to the drawing board and I would look at that objection and I would study it. And I would say, okay, what could I have said here? Or the next time that this comes up, because I know it's going to come up. Again, there's 10 to 12 kind of canned objections in my line of work, as I'm sure there are, and anyone else that's listening. So how do I overcome that objection the next time I hear it? And then literally when I go to make my calls the next day from 8 to 10, I'll pull up my objection sheet and I'll just be ready. I'll be ready for when somebody gives me that objection. I'll be able to scroll to it really quickly. The first few times it's rehearsed, right? So I just read off the script, and whatever that objection is, whatever my rebuttal is, I should say, I would just read it off a script. And naturally over time, it just becomes second nature. So I know if somebody says this, the next thing that I say is this. So again, it's a repeatable strategy, which I think is most important, again, for me, to just be able to write it out and then rehearse it time and time again.
That is an excellent point of feedback that I want to make sure our entrepreneurs hear and write down, because I think what objections also tell you are ways in which your customer is not well informed in either the process or what you're providing. So it can inform you in a marketing standpoint of where you're maybe not giving them information that they need. And so if you get the same objections over time, maybe you need to articulate something a little bit different on your website, or there's a blockage between them putting something in their cart and actually like hitting the order button, right? And so if you
Right.
hear what that is, you can actually make informed decisions to make those things better.
Yep, exactly.
Awesome.
So I have a quick question, Steve. What do you track in terms of metrics? First of all, do you use a tool, a Salesforce or something like that? And what do you track for metrics for yourself, or does your firm ask you to track?
Sure. So good question, Robin Ann. So we use similar to Salesforce. It's called HubSpot. So I don't know if you're familiar with HubSpot or not, but it's another CRM software. So some of the metrics that we obviously will track is win rate. So how many meetings does it take to actually close a prospective client? And our win rate, believe it or not, this might be shocking to some people, I mean, it hovers right around 20 to 30%. So we're literally talking every 2-3 out of 10 people that you speak with, you're closing. So that's not a great win rate, right? But it's kind of like the baseball analogy. It's, hey, you get a hit 2 out of 3 out of 10 times that you come up with that, you're a great baseball player. I think the same is true for sales. So that's one of the metrics that we track. We do track response rates. So how oftentimes people are responding to emails, how oftentimes people are picking up the phone. And again, in this day and age, I mean, maybe 10%, if that, of people are actually picking up the phone. Hence, as far as I'm concerned, the importance of really leaning on your network as much as you possibly can to make that initial first introduction. You know, if a warm email comes from somebody in your network to a prospective group you're trying to get in with, in my experience at least, not only is the click rate, so the open rate on the email significantly higher, upwards of 60-70%, maybe a little more, but also that win rate then goes up to about 40 to 50%. When it's a pure cold call and cold opportunity, the chances for success, dwindle pretty significantly.
That's helpful. Thanks.
You're very welcome.
All right. I don't know if there's any other questions here, but this has been really, really helpful. And I enjoyed that quick and easy, like 4 tips that was digestible and easy to understand. So thank you for taking the time to put that together. At this point, we will wrap the conversation, but look forward to having you in various other capacities to talk with other startups and other programs. So thank you so much, Steve, for joining us today.
Yes, thank you all of you. It was my pleasure, and I look forward to continuing the conversation here. So thank you.
Great. And I know now we want to kick it over to Robin, who has a quick announcement with some upcoming programs that we have at CCEI.
Yeah, hi, thanks. I'm Robin Benjamin. I'm with the Family Business Program at CCEI, and we've got a lot going on next month, and then working on a whole lot of fun stuff for the fall. So the big things we're doing is we're launching our member partnership campaign. We've had a very active ecosystem, and the university's been supporting it, and some of our partners have been supporting it. And now we're looking to engage actually the family businesses and sort of a bigger network. So we're excited about that. You'll be seeing stuff on that coming up. We've got a governance series. We think in privately held and family businesses, governance is important. It's sort of about alignment and accountability. And if you don't have that, it's hard to get anything done. So we've got a legal lunch, which is a virtual thing we're doing on the 2nd of June. We've got a follow-on workshop the middle of June that we're doing. We've got some fun stuff. It's so nice to be back in person. So we're doing some mini golf out at a family business in Canton. And we're going to follow it up with some cocktails at another family business. It's all about family businesses and the family business program. And then the Hartford Business Journal's got a family business awards that's also the middle of June. So we've got some folks that have been nominated, and we're excited to be doing some things with them. And then in the fall, we've got more legal lunches and some more workshops. We're going to do a workshop that actually Steve might be interesting to include in that. We want to do a workshop on revenue, sales and marketing. That's important for every business. And one on transitions to new owners, new generations, or new management teams. Those are our workshops planned. And we're going to follow up with some more social networking. We're planning a golf outing at Lyman Orchards, another family business, and then doing a turkey dinner at Miller Foods. So that's our roadmap. We hope we can get lots of folks to come and join us.
Awesome. Thank you, Robin. And thank you, Steve, for joining us again today. And thank you, everyone, for joining and listening into what Steve had to say. I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you.